theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. The post-mortem on RFK Jr.'s appearance before the Senate Finance Committee last week continued into the weekend. RFK Jr., as we discussed quite a bit last week after his testimony, which was spirited to say the least, and there were some very good exchanges between him and senators, both Republicans and Democrats, about the influence of Big Pharma through its campaign cash, about all the lies that were promulgated by so-called public health officials during COVID. I mean, there's that part of this, part of what he is doing and what he is charged to do is to bring a sort of reckoning to these public health agencies for their conduct during COVID. If you can't do it individually, like Fauci and Birx, perhaps it can be done institutionally.
They don't want to hear the answers to the questions that they ask me. They want to make a little speech and then shut me down. But they can't deny the fact that we did worse than COVID, that the CDC is a broken agency. We did worse in COVID than any country in the world. We have 4.2% of the world's population. We have 20% of the world's COVID deaths. We literally we're the worst team in the league. I've been brought in as a new manager, and my job is to shake up the organization, to fire the people who were responsible for masking our children with no science, for social distancing orders with no science, or all the other thing, for all of the other things that they try, for closing our schools at the behest of the teachers union and hurting workers all over America. These were bad. We literally did worse than any country in the world, and it was because we forgot about the science. And what we're going to do, what the Trump administration is going to do, is to return gold standard science and make this agency the lead agency for public health in the world once again.
And President Trump was asked about the exchanges, including, as I said, with Republican senators like Bill Cassidy. And he backed RFK Jr.'s play. He likes that he's a bit of a provocateur, RFK Jr. He likes that he may be a bit of a contrarian.
Senator Bill Cassidy said effectively we're denying people vaccines. Do you have full confidence in what RFK Jr. is doing?
Well, I didn't get to watch the hearings today, but he's a very good person. And he means very well, and he's got some little different ideas. I guarantee a lot of the people at this table like RFK Jr., and I do. But he's got a different take, and we want to listen to all of those takes. But I heard he did very well today. But it's not your standard. It's not your standard talk, I would say, and that has to do with medical and vaccines. But if you look at what's going on in the world with health, and look at this country also with regard to health, I like the fact that he's different.
Yeah, that he's focused on chronic disease, particularly chronic disease in kids. But of course, RFK's testimony and the accusations that he is an anti-vax ideologue bring out all the COVIDians from, the bygone era of the last 4 years. But I should say, it's not a bygone era, not everywhere. California. Public health officials in California reporting a late summer COVID-19 wave are proposing masking. Because COVID cases have doubled in California, officials advise indoor masking. You thought they would never do that again? Well, I mean, in some states, some jurisdictions, California, apparently not one of them. Public officials at the state level recommending masking. The lies continue to cover the lies previously told. And actually others, too, like Paul Offit, who is Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And he was a bit of a COVIDian, but he also at least acknowledged some things that many others didn't acknowledge. That like by July of 23, he was agreeing that, myocarditis is a thing. It's a problem. He also didn't believe that COVID boosters, after the first couple of waves, were required for healthy young people because their healthy young people are unlikely to benefit. So he's not, complete COVIDian ideologue, but he also is not pleased with RFK Jr.
Because I think what happened in the first 2 years of the COVID pandemic is that people started to have a lack of trust in agencies like the CDC or the FDA, the National Institutes of Health, and he represents that. He represents basically the kind of this libertarian left hook that we leaned into those first 2 years of the pandemic, and now we see him as someone who has disdain for the agency that he heads, and we are all going to suffer that.
Yeah, I don't think that's exactly right. In fact, I think it's pretty far from being right. I think he has disdain, as many of us do, for what happened and for the decisions that were made and the propaganda that was promulgated and the lies that were told. And we feel like nobody gets held accountable professionally, if not legally, for how wrong they were about so many things. And it's not as you heard him too, it's not the agency he has disdain for, it's what the agency had become, and he's there to essentially do a turnaround job. But this is, the line you're going to hear from a lot of people that rose to some prominence, out of obscurity in the medical profession, from prominence because they were, platformed 24/7 by the cable news channels. And this is what you're hearing about RFK Jr. now as they try to basically take him out to get to Trump. As always, all roads lead to Trump. And this is, of course, being compounded by what Dr. Joseph Ladapo announced in Florida, that they're looking to end vaccine mandates altogether for school children. This is what you're going to hear from the quote unquote medical professionals, the associations that Bernie Sanders is so impressed with, like the AMA and the American Pediatric Association and all these other politicized professional advocacy groups.
And we're getting his point of view, which is that he's going to make vaccines less available, less affordable, and more feared. I really fear for the health of America's children with him as the principal public health officer.
For more on this and other topics, so please be joined by Phil Kerpen, president of the American Commitment and the principal of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Phil, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Dan.
So, you were a sensible voice and a data-driven voice during COVID too. I know that you made special attention on this topic as we were all trying to pour through and gain an understanding of what was being suggested by whom and what made sense and what didn't. How do you react to where we are with RFK Jr., his testimony last week, and the backlash against him, as well as Florida?
Well, I watch all these CDC employees out picketing with their signs and all this stuff, and yeah. I just think let them go. Patco them. Let them go. Let's get better people in there, because that institution in particular, but the entire public health apparatus, failed so catastrophically. And I think that the only way you can make the case for anything in public health at this point is to make it totally voluntary, to put the best data and information that you have on the table and let people make their decisions. Once you're mandating things, once you're requiring things, people are going to be suspicious of it and whether it's actually in their interest, or why would mandates be necessary. And, a lot of countries do not have vaccine mandates. Sweden has none, for instance. If you want to look at the country that performed the best in terms of excess death during the pandemic, it didn't fall for the lockdowns and a lot of the destructive things. They don't mandate any of their vaccines. Now, they have very high childhood vaccination rates, but they do it without mandates. They do it by explaining the information. Parents decide what they want to do and so forth. And so I don't think Florida's so crazy with this. I think, if you want to rebuild trust and confidence, you've got to prove it. You can't have any more take our word for it. We're going to decide what's best for you and your family.
Mm. Yeah, right. I mean, it's a classic tale. I mean, you destroy your credibility, and then you come back to me like nothing happened. But I remember I remember what happened. I remember you just lied to me, and now you're standing in front of me telling me what to do again. And you don't think I remember?
It's incredible. And by the way, California, this happened every year because California is a warm weather state. And, a lot of the states in southern latitudes, and, COVID comes in two waves every single year. Okay. It's not like flu that basically comes in one wave. COVID comes in two waves every single year. We've seen this thing since it first appeared on the scene. And in warm weather places, they get it in the summer, probably because they're inside in air conditioning all summer in those places, but maybe something with the humidity or the atmospheric conditions makes it more transmissible. We don't really know for sure exactly why. Whether there's something beyond just people being inside in air-conditioned spaces, something in the dynamics of the virus itself or not. But we do know this has happened every single year. It rises in the summer, and then it crashes when the kids go back to school and they start passing rhinoviruses around instead, and those get kind of market share in the fire realm. Every single year this happens. And every single year, after it's already peaked and is in decline, we get, oh my God, it's rising. We're going to bring back masks in California. These stories, these have happened every year. And the amazing thing is every time I start seeing these stories, I say, oh, let me see what's going on there. And every year they start doing it a couple of weeks after COVID has peaked and is already declining.
Well, the other,
it's an incredible ritual.
Yeah, it is a ritual. The other thing too is we're still talking, and they're still talking about cases as opposed to the idea of serious illness or death. We don't get any information to substantiate their
right.
calling for mass again.
The one thing I would disagree with RFK on is we were not the highest COVID deaths in the world. That's not true. There were probably 10 or 12 countries that were higher in the metric that I used, which is all-cause excess death. We didn't do particularly well, but we were not the worst of the worst. We were very good at counting and attributing things to COVID. And, if we pay for your funeral expenses, if and only if COVID's somewhere on the death certificate, a lot of medical examiners that feel for a family want to help them pay for a funeral and so forth. They're going to put it on there. And, we also had some of the laxest standards for inclusion of anywhere in the world. So I don't really use the ticker numbers. I think you have to use the all-cause excess to kind of look at country performance during the pandemic. And we were not great, but we were not the worst. He had that wrong in my judgment.
The New York Times, just on this mask thing too, because it's not just California, of course it's the coast, but New York Times feature story, the best cloth and K95 face masks for kids and toddlers as they go back to school.
That's this year?
Yeah, that's the August 29th story. Yeah, best cloth and KN95 masks for kids and toddlers. I mean, they're just incorrigible. They will never admit. They'll never accept any responsibility for anything, and they'll never admit that they were incorrect about anything. These COVIDians, it's astounding to watch.
And then they wonder why so many people want to basically burn these institutions to the ground. The American Academy of Pediatrics is probably the worst of the worst, by the way, because as I'm sure you recall, but it bears repeating constantly, they originally got schools right, and they put out guidance the last week of June 2020 saying all the kids need to be in school. That's more important than 6 feet distance. It's more important than any of these other considerations. It was actually pretty, and it actually said, don't even try to mask elementary school kids. They did say to mask high school, which I disagreed with also. But on the whole, I was really pleasantly surprised when that came out. And then President Trump said, oh, this is great. All the schools should be open. This is what the pediatricians say. And 7 days later, they reversed themselves in a literal joint statement with the two largest teachers unions in the country. They said, oh, well, no, we meant, they should be open unless there's a lot of COVID around. And there was COVID everywhere. So they basically did a 180-degree reversal. And the only thing that had changed in the interim was President Trump was citing their guidance. They didn't want to be associated with him. They didn't want to support what he was supporting. And so what I think was nakedly political motivation took over. And they did it in the most disgusting way possible in a literal joint statement with the teachers unions that were basically saying we want all the schools closed until we get a massive payday shakedown ransom payment. And, now, and I never really liked the American Academy of Pediatrics because they have a bad record on a lot of other things before. But
yeah, like transing kids.
Yeah, transing kids. I mean, they're the geniuses that came up with keep peanuts totally away from your kids for the first, however many years of life until they develop an allergy. And they're like, oh, sorry, we've created all these allergies. Actually, you need to expose them to peanuts. A total fiasco. You got a whole generation that has like all these hypersensitive peanut people because of their recommendations based on nothing. And they did the scam with the rear-facing car seats, with keep your kids rear-facing for years and years and years based on one study that was later retracted. So I don't like them as an institution, but the media still loves them, and they'll run them out to criticize Trump and to criticize RFK. And I'm generally pretty supportive of most of the vaccines. Generally, the data is pretty good. Obviously, the COVID data was very bad, and I'm not going to give that one to my kids. But, this idea that the only way you get people to do what you want them to do and improve the health of their kids is to mandate and to force rather than to explain and persuade, I just think it's going to cause a lot more problems than it solves. And I think RFK recognizes that.
Yeah, and the thing, I have my skepticisms about RFK coming in, and certainly statements he's made previously that I disagree with on vaccines as well as on environmental policy, for example. But my sense that the criticism that he's an anti-vax ideologue, that is really belied by the approach. Whether maybe his personal opinion is that or not, I don't know. But the approach he's taken in his job as HHS secretary is not one thus far of an anti-vax ideologue.
Yeah, well, look, he's also got kind of a dream team of sub-cabinet personnel.
Yes.
And
yeah.
He's got really, really high-quality people. He's got my friend Jay Bhattacharya at NIH. We've got Marty McCary, who's fantastic at FDA.
Right.
Vinay Prasad, who was run out of town, was brought back, which I thought was a very good corrective. So we've got very, very bright people. And they're trying to wrangle bureaucracies. And by the way, we actually had reasonably good leadership at the CDC when Redfield was there. He wasn't the problem. The problem was he never got control of his own agency.
Yeah.
And so, when these people are walking out, I'm saying, great, good.
Yeah, well, it's going to be really hard to replace that monkeypox guy. So let me ask you another question about data, about another topic, since this is your bailiwick. The jobs numbers. Interesting piece at Committee to Unleash Prosperity from an analysis done by an economist named James Lavish. Basically, that, and this has been said, Steve Moore said it when we talked to him last week, but the jobs numbers, it's always sort of been junk, but now because the response rate is so low and other factors, it's not. The sort of the read from this is it's completely unreliable. It's completely not statistically significant.
Well, you just look at the size of the revisions we've been getting, and you know that these first prints are just not that they're not going to stay what they are very long. They're going to bounce all over the place. And you're right, the response rate really collapsed during the COVID lockdowns, and it never came back up after. And when you've got a survey that surveys around 1% of businesses, if that. It misses a lot. And in fact, they have this huge fudge factor with this Lavish post when he was writing it. They have this huge fudge factor called their birth-death model, where they try to statistically estimate, how many businesses went out of business and how many new ones were created that they can't be surveyed yet. And it's total guesswork. It's total guesswork. And in fact, we're flying blind a little bit on jobs. We don't know if these bad jobs reports we've been getting are wrong, and actually the jobs market is stronger than that, or if it's even worse, if it's we're really edging into an employment recession. It could be collapse just because the error band is so large around these numbers because of these problems. And a lot of people criticize President Trump for firing Erica McIntyre but she didn't fix any of these problems. And he did veer a little bit into conspiracy territory when he said she was politically motivated. Because I don't think there's evidence of that. It might be true, but there's no evidence of that. Mm-hmm. But what we do know is she didn't fix these surveys. We have this huge divergence between the household survey and the employer survey. We didn't figure that out. We didn't fix it. We've got this response rate problem. Now, this is not unique to BLS. I mean, the same thing's happening in political polling. The same thing's happening in every other kind of survey methodology. It's hard to reach people these days. I get that. But you got to figure out a way to do it where you're not going to be issuing these huge revisions on a regular basis, and where you've got where you're relying on this statistical model that's essentially guesswork about how many new businesses were created and destroyed. And so, I think I really like some of the ideas that E.J. Antoni's put forward. I hope that it'll be confirmed. I think that the most important one is the idea of offering some incentive. Some kind of a tax incentive or inducement for survey participation. I mean, you can't ask people's time just out of the goodness of their heart for businesses to participate. We see that does not get enough participation. And so if we have some sort of a small incentive to bring participation back up, I think that would be really helpful. And I also think they've got to fix this model of how many businesses are created and destroyed so that it's much more data-based and they have inputs to determine what's actually happening rather than sort of a guesswork kind of model. This trillions of dollars move with these numbers when they come out.
Right.
We need to figure out how to make them much better on the first print.
Speaking of big moves that are policy related, what sort of contingency planning do you suspect is going on in the event that the Supreme Court concludes unfavorably on Trump's argument in terms of his power to impose tariffs, or even offer some sort of middle way where some of the tariffs imposed are okay and others are not on various legal theories that have been presented?
Well, I think there's a pretty strong likelihood that they will overturn the reciprocal tariffs and the tariffs on Canada and Mexico that were based on the IEEPA. I think that it's hard, it was an 8-4 decision at the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit. The 4 that dissented included 2 Democrat-appointed judges and 2 Republican-appointed judges. And so this is not going to be a clean split, I don't think, at the Supreme Court. It's hard to sort of estimate, and it's hard to sort of forecast what they're going to do, because the 3 judges who are most inclined as a matter of legal philosophy to support the president because they believe in unchecked massive federal power are the 3 Democrat-appointed justices. On the other hand, they're not likely to do anything that helps Trump. And so, the sort of the practical political considerations, to the extent that motivates the legal reasoning, they're more likely to vote against the president. And I think, I like to think that the Republican-appointed justices are not susceptible to such pressures and considerations, and they'll decide on the legal merits. But realistically, some of them may vote for the president's position out of, sympathy towards him and his agenda. And so I don't think it's going to be a neat 6-3 Republican-appointed justices strike it down. Democrat-appointed justices uphold it, even though on the legal merits, that's kind of what you would expect based on recent cases. It's going to be not that. And so I don't know what it will be. But I'm a strong believer in the idea that major economic policies for the country, especially tax policies, need to be set by Congress. And so I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of the president dusting off a very old law that doesn't talk about tariffs and sort of fashioning national economic policy himself on that basis. I think that's a legitimately legislative function. And so, I think if he wants these policies, he should convince Congress to pass them. And that may be one of the responses we could see. Now, there are other authorities that are much more legitimate. So, for instance, the steel and aluminum tariffs under Section 232, those are not in question. Those are going to stay in effect with this. And that's actually, I think, from a policy standpoint, a little unfortunate, because those are some of the most destructive tariffs. There's so many companies that use those metals as inputs, and they've been being hit by big cost increases, and the manufacturing harm outweighs the benefit of the narrow sector that produces steel and aluminum. We've seen that pretty clearly in the data, but those are going to stay in regardless of what happens with this. The court could order all those tariffs that were paid to be refunded, which would be kind of challenging logistically for the Treasury. But we may see the president try to reimpose them under a different authority. What I would hope he would do, what I would like to see him do, is submit the tariff schedule and the agreements that you've got with these different countries and with the EU, and send them to Congress for a vote. Let's do this the legitimate way. If we want to make it the law, let's make it the law the legitimate way. And if it fails, that tells you that it doesn't have the support and it shouldn't be in effect. And so I'm, Your audience may be a little bit more with Trump, no matter what he does, no matter how he does it, than I am. But I think process is really important. Even if you support what he's doing, process is really important, because if you give unlimited powers to a president in a particular area and you undercut the legal precedents that have been moving the other way in recent years, a lot of things are going to happen in the next Democratic administration that you're not going to like. And so I think you need to see beyond the particular situation and get these things right on principle.
Phil Kerpen, president of American Commitment and principal of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Phil, thanks as always. Appreciate it.
All right, have a good one.
You too. And Phil joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line. Coming up 7:37, all things Illinois policy related with Ted Dabrowski. Now we check the headlines.
Good morning. It's 54 degrees in Chicago in the AM 560 The Answer newsroom. I'm Nikki.